Thanksgiving weekend of 2020, you could have forgiven many combat sports enthusiasts if they'd never heard the name of former Disney actor and YouTuber Jake Paul before. But in less than 1 year's time, he has become one of the most famous boxers on the planet. Paul knocked former three-time NBA slam dunk champion Nate Robinson out cold. People were then clamoring for him to take a step up in competition, which he did in the case of former MMA champion and UFC star Ben Askren. Paul would go on to dispose of Askren in less than 2 minutes into round one. After that performance, Jake Paul not only silenced many of his doubters, but he started to get called out by fighters all across the combat sports landscape. So who would Paul pick as his next foe in only his fourth professional boxing match? Enter former UFC welterweight champion Tyron Woodley, who, unlike Askren, has dangerous power, especially with his right hand. And it didn't take long before the trash talk between Paul and Woodley ensued.
I saw a man who just accepted a fight mostly for a paycheck. I saw a man who's been defeated multiple times now and who will be finished and sent into retirement by YouTube Disney star boxer.
Keyword, you saw a man.
At just age 24, Jake Paul has seemingly turned the fight game upside down. And his quote-unquote hit list features some very interesting names should he get by Woodley. Will the problem child put on another epic performance in front of his hometown fans in Cleveland? Or will Woodley dampen that hype? We're in for a fascinating night in C-Town, only on Showtime pay-per-view.
Let's get right to the site, The Land. Welcome in CBS Sports combat analyst and co-host of Morning Combat, Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell, who join us from one of the best cities in the world, Cleveland, Ohio. The hometown kid, Jake Paul, facing Tyron Woodley. There was a dust-up at the news conference on Thursday. Woodley said he heard a member of Paul's team talking trash to his mom. BC set the stage for this spectacle that's scheduled to go down on Sunday night.
Yeah, make no mistake, not your traditional boxing pay-per-view bout. It's a special night, special time, 8 p.m. Eastern on Sunday night, and a special matchup because, yes, there's celebrity aspects, there's boxing versus MMA, there's a lot of other factors that certainly could bring in other fan bases, but I think at the end of the day, this is the best matchup to date of this kind of category of celebrity crossover, sort of circus-y fights, and we had circus-y feel at the press conference on Thursday, but I think the best thing altogether is that nobody knows who's going to win this fight. You can't know because both, even though Tyron Woodley's got a decorated background in mixed martial arts as a very credible defending champion, he doesn't have the professional boxing experience. This will be his pro debut, and for what we have learned up to this point through 3 pro fights for Jake Paul, it's just not enough to know what Sunday night is going to look like. So what's the feeling been like in Cleveland? It's been excitement, buzz, that kind of unpredictability that can happen with fights like this. Big-time personalities, but big-time power for the two of them. I just can't wait to see what this looks like. I've been won over. I'm in. They think already. People are calling me the Jake Paul of CBS Sports HQ. I'm ready for this kind of. Let's go, please.
Right. Well, first of all, no one calls him that. No one's ever called him that. But getting to your question, Hakeem, you know, it's kind of funny. I will say this. Everything Brian said is true. I don't disagree with any of it. But here's what's funny. This fight, this event, it's kind of a contradiction, right? Because for everything that Brian said that was true, at the same time, it does feel like a sort of normal fight week. There's a normal schedule of events, media workouts, press conferences, weigh-ins, and so forth. Jake Paul is not an experienced fighter by any stretch of the imagination, but he certainly talks like a main eventer. He knows how to do press conferences. They all feel the same. Everyone has their entourages, all the mix-ups and everything like that. In many ways, it has all the trimmings of a traditional fight week, but as Brian indicated, beneath the surface there, that's when things start to get a little weird.
Jake Paul coming off his win against former UFC fighter Ben Askren, now facing former UFC welterweight champ Tyron Woodley in his 4th professional fight. Woodley 15 years older than Jake Paul. Luke, how big of a step up in competition is this for Jake Paul?
It is a big step up in competition, but it comes with a ton of asterisks. So, like, understand what would be the difference between what Tyron Woodley would offer versus Ben Askren, right? Because both have sort of decorated wrestling backgrounds. Well, one, Ben was really at the end of his athletic journey. He had his hip replaced before that fight, and he was retired, and he was never a good striker. He was very strong, very athletic in his time, but there had been some serious degradation. Tyron Woodley is not that guy. He is still pretty athletic. Power is the last thing to go. He is a undeniable power puncher, and while he didn't have the same heights inside of scholastic and then freestyle wrestling that Ben Askren did, his game translated better. He actually hit much higher heights inside of the octagon than Ben Askren ever did. He was a champion inside the UFC and defended it multiple times. That's something Ben Askren could never say he did. So when it comes to the striking and the athleticism and the power, it's a huge step up. But as BC and I have been talking about all week, what does that mean for boxing, right? So, for example, if you have a quarterback and he can throw the big long ball, but only because they can fake the run, what happens when they can't fake the run anymore? That's what we're going to find out on Sunday.
Yeah, this actually is really good matchmaking. That's part of my enthusiasm for this. Like, you can't really tell up to this point, is Tyron Woodley the perfect name, credentialed, but still older and flawed enough where this looks like a great victory on paper for Jake Paul if it happens? He may be that. It also may be the wrong opponent for Jake Paul in a trap fight from the standpoint of those first 3 opponents. Say what you will about them, they weren't fighters, and they certainly didn't have the threat once we saw how the fight was playing out, of bringing danger to Jake Paul. At the very least, this fight brings that with Tyron Woodley. I think either guy can win by knockout, and I think Jake Paul, who is looking to actually gain the respect of the boxing purists rather than stick his tongue out in the face of them, even though we're seeing some strategic, like we said, matchmaking and how he's doing this journey, he's trying to be legit. What he's doing in training camp, that's legit. When they touch gloves, it's going to be a legit fight. I don't know how good the skills will be. I do know it's a pick 'em. It is a pick 'em, and the betting odds certainly reflect that.
Well, Jake Paul clearly doesn't respect Tyron Woodley. In fact, he said he's looking past Tyron Woodley. Take a listen.
Tyron Woodley, he really is the chosen one. We chose him to get his ass beat. 5-time UFC champion, da-da-da, explosive, da-da-da, knockout power. That's all cool, but none of that matters Sunday night. And I'm sending him into retirement, turning him into a meme. I am overlooking Tyron Woodley. You know, most people sit up here like Fury, and he's like, oh, I have a tough opponent. No. When I know what's going to happen, when I'm confident in my skill, I'm already thinking about the next opponent.
All right, so the line was, I'm sending him into retirement, turning him into a meme, end quote. My reaction, that just sounds stupid. You don't overlook your opponent in any sport. BC, your reaction to his comments.
Sorry, Boomer. This is how they do it nowadays. You're cocky, you're brash, and that's who Jake Paul is, whether that's a character that he plays, which I think the Showtime All Access documentary crew has done a great job sort of trying to show you that juxtaposition there. But, you know, Jake Paul talks the talk because up to this point, he's walked the walk, at least in terms of the matchmaking that he has set up for himself. So you can love it, you can hate it, the shirtless, the tats. I know you're a very, you know, hard judge against tattoo.
I am. Although his are pretty good.
Well, there's something. At the end of the day, it won't matter if Jake Paul goes in there and delivers the boom like he has the potential to do. Look, both Paul brothers, of course, Logan Paul, the 26-year-old, is Jake's older brother, but in this game as well, they're a lot smarter than people give them credit for, and I think it's because of the personas and that they put out there. But they are doing the work behind the scenes. So when Jake Paul says, you know, Woodley's just a step toward the future, he is looking 3-4 steps ahead. He's co-promoter of this card. He's sort of co-producer of the event Sunday night. Jake Paul going to wear a lot of hats, but you saw Tommy Fury sitting behind him. He's already thinking potentially of what could be next.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you look at him in there, hat on sideways, all the ice, all the tats. He's from the suburbs of Cleveland. You know, listen, part of being a prize fighter is just saying impossibly stupid things and then trying to back them up. And if he goes out there and he knocks out Tyron Woodley, what are we going to say at that point, Hakeem? We could say that looks not for us. I wouldn't even hire this person to mow my yard, but they can go out there and he can do incredible things. And also, as BC kind of indicated, there's a method to the madness. He might come across as insanely over the top at these public events. It's all by design because, as he indicated, when the cameras are not there and it's really go time, he is training incredibly hard. Everything we are hearing from anybody who knows anything, and BC was actually even down there in Puerto Rico, knows that, like, hate him or love him, the guys put in the work that they were supposed to for this. So the theatrics and the look can go a little bit too far. They can obviously say things that don't really make a lot of sense. But if they can win on Sunday, it almost doesn't matter.
Yeah, I don't care how he looks. Just what he said sounded stupid. I mean, look, that's all I say. I mean, look, if you can talk the talk, you better walk the walk. That's all I'm saying. And by the way, BC, I'm younger than you, so you can't call me a boomer. So let's clear that up. All right? You can't be. I mean, what are we doing here? I mean, just let's have a little respect. It's fine. I like the trash talk. You know, I love the trash talk. But come on, have a little respect for Tyron Woodley.
I'm still waiting for you to. I'm still waiting for you to back up those claims about the city of Cleveland, okay? But that's for another show.
Well,
another time.
I guess I'll have to be your host in Cleveland, not here in studio in Stamford, Connecticut. I'll have to be there to take you for a tour, take you to places like the Proper Pig. That's my restaurant. You'll love it. Sounds great?
Oh, wow.
Okay.
Hit that up. All right. Tyron Woodley's UFC career, as you guys know, came to a disappointing end, didn't win a round in his final 4 UFC fights. Now turning to boxing, said it's not going to be a one-off. He wants to continue in boxing. BC, what's at stake for Tyron Woodley in this fight?
It can be easily looked at as just, it's just a big payday, right? And we know the constant ongoing talk about UFC fighters, MMA fighters being underpaid, and they are across the board. And Jake Paul has sort of used his platform right now, leading the charge in boxing, to try to point that out. And for Tyron Woodley, there is some elements of that in there. He wasn't always given the push when he was UFC champion and the love from a commercial marketing standpoint. You have to believe he loves being the center of attention here. It's a new sport for him, no doubt. He's not here for one fight, as he says. He wants to keep doing this professional boxing thing, not necessarily against YouTubers, against whatever fights he can make moving forward. I think there's a retribution to how his UFC career ended as well. That was 4 straight defeats. 3 of those, though, were a little bit more to do about lifelessness and failure to launch than a guy who was going out there and getting beat up around the ring or the cage, so to speak. I think for this one, it's you almost forgot to steal the Roy Jones line. Tyron Woodley believes the odds are way out of whack. He doesn't believe the size difference is actually a thing between these two when they do look each other in the eye, and he's expecting to go out there and deliver the boom to keep his name alive, to keep making big paydays in this alternate combat space for him. A win would be huge.
I'll say this. Listen, the claim about even win or lose, especially if lose, but even win, the idea that there's going to be some kind of rejuvenation around the age of 40 in a sport you've never competed in, even with, competition adjusted on a scale. No, sorry, that's not going to happen. He'll get maybe a few of these at most, and that will be that. No one has a 5 or 10 year career in bare knuckle. It doesn't exist that way. So the point being is there's only a handful of these. But what I do think is on the table is something we didn't really think about until we saw Anderson Silva get a big win going against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. And yes, obviously, Anderson Silva, a completely different level of striker. But the point being is he went in there and took on a boxing opponent on his terms, and he won. And there was a lot of adulation because Anderson Silva's end of his UFC run was not really all that special. He lost in the end in the Apex facility with no audience. There was really no great goodbye for him. Tyron Woodley didn't get a great goodbye either. I mean, they forced him out. Well, they didn't force him out the door, but the losses obviously ushered in the demise of his UFC experience. And so I'll say this, getting a win over Jake Paul, for whatever people want to think about him, I do think it would be good for Tyron Woodley. I think it would be good for his brand. I think it would make folks remember what an incredibly good champion he was in his prime. I would be, I don't think it'd be the worst thing to see.
Woodley listed as the underdog in this fight at +160, while Jake Paul is the favorite at -190. And this fight, for me, feels bigger than just Woodley. Like, he has to win it for UFC. Jorge Masvidal said Woodley would knock out Jake Paul. BC, what's your prediction?
I think you're going to see action. I think you're going to see chaos at the same time. Look, the only thing we do know is neither have detailed experience in this specific craft. If somebody's going to do better in later rounds, if this goes the full 8, I'm certainly going to like Woodley's chances. But what I think Jake Paul does well in the boxing space, from the little we know so far, is leans into his strengths. And what are his strengths? The youth, 24 years old. He's a big boy with an athletic background in multiple team sports. He can deliver the knockout boom on this level. Woodley's the toughest opponent. I expect Woodley to get to that chin of Paul, and we're going to learn a little bit about how Jake Paul operates under the hood. Does he have those intangibles, the toughness? I think at the end of the day, though, the quicker Jake Paul makes this an actual fight, the quicker he has a better chance of finishing it, given the youth, given the size. Woodley may say they're the same size, Luke, but that 4-inch height difference also says something as well.
There's no doubt about it. I'll make it a breakdown like this, Hakeem. Here's what I would say. I don't know what to make of Tyron Woodley's boxing. I've never really seen it. I've seen every one of his MMA fights, but that's not boxing, and the rules are different, and the incentives are different, and the realities are different. There's not a whole lot you can necessarily take from that other than big power-punching athletic, and we've sort of been over it. What I would say is this is the Jake Paul show. His promotional company is partnering 50% with Showtime on this, so he has a ton of say over how everything has gone, and because he has so much control from soup to nuts about everything, including the selection of the opponent, it just feels like to me like, not every time, but basically the house always wins. Jake Paul in this particular case is the casino. So am I betting on the casino to get the best of the betting on a given night? Yeah, I probably am.
All right. Both Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell backing Jake Paul. I'm not, even though he's from Cleveland. He's from Westlake, so I appreciate that, but I'm not backing Jake Paul. Give me Tyron Woodley, because Tyron Woodley owes me, because he lost to Gilbert Burns. He lost to Gilbert Burns. He owes me. He payback. He owes me. No, I'm just kidding. He doesn't know me. You guys don't owe me either.
That was a dark day in your finance. Okay.
No, that's fine. PC, I appreciate it. It was. That was.
right.
I had Tyron Woodley in that fight against Gilbert Burns, and Gilbert Burns was phenomenal in that fight. Hopefully, Tyron Woodley is phenomenal on Sunday night at Showtime.
Tour Cleveland 2021. Be there.
Let's go. Hey, for all things Kombat, check out Morning Kombat with Luke Thomas and Brian Campbell. You can watch the series on YouTube. You can also listen to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. Morning Kombat. Download and subscribe today.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.